England, 1817. The storm had been raging for hours when the pounding came at Amelia Hartley's door. Sharp, urgent, relentless, she looked up from the mortar and pestle in her hands, lavender and chamomile half ground into powder, and felt her stomach tighten with instinct. Nothing good arrived at midnight. Setting down her work, Amelia crossed the small cottage, her bare feet silent on the worn wooden floors. Through the window, lightning split the sky, illuminating a grand carriage bearing a crest she recognized immediately. The Duke of Ashford seal. Her hand hesitated on the door latch. She had seen that crest only once before, 5 years ago at the village market. She'd been kneeling beside a child who'd fallen, cleaning scraped knees with yarrow salve, when she'd looked up to find a tall, dark-haired gentleman watching her. Their eyes had met for a breathless moment, before he'd turned away, climbing into his carriage without a word. She'd thought about that moment more times than she cared to admit. The pounding came again. Amelia opened the door. A man stood in the rain, the Duke's steward by the silver buttons on his coat. Water streamed from his hat brim as he thrust a sealed letter toward her. "Miss Hartley, you must come at once. The Dowager Duchess is dying. His Grace requests your immediate attendance." Amelia broke the wax seal with trembling fingers. The letter inside was brief, the handwriting rushed and uneven, as if written by someone barely maintaining control. "Miss Hartley, my mother has days, perhaps hours. Every physician in London has failed. I have heard tales of your gift from the villagers you have saved. I am begging you, please come. Name your price. I will pay anything. Signed, Sebastian Ashford, Duke of Ashford." Something about those words, the raw desperation bleeding through formal script, made Amelia's decision instant. "Give me 5 minutes to gather my supplies." She moved quickly through her cottage, pulling down jars and bundles from shelves her father had built 20 years ago. Feverfew for inflammation, elderberry for the lungs, willow bark for pain. Her father had taught her everything before the consumption took him 3 years past, leaving her alone with knowledge most people feared and a calling she couldn't abandon even if she wanted to. Amelia was 27 now, unmarried, living alone in a world that didn't quite know what to make of a woman who could cure illnesses that baffled trained physicians. She'd had suitors over the years, men who wanted to control her gift or men too intimidated by it to stay. She'd chosen solitude over surrender, independence over a marriage that would cage her. But this summons felt different, urgent, important, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with illness. The carriage ride to Ashford Manor took an hour through sheets of rain. Amelia clutched her leather medicine bag and watched the countryside disappear into darkness. The steward sat across from her, silent and grim. When she asked about the dowager's symptoms, he simply shook his head. "You'll see soon enough, miss." Ashford Manor rose from the storm like something from a Gothic novel. Lightning illuminated grey stone walls, towers that pierced the black sky, windows that gleamed like watching eyes. The carriage lurched to a stop before massive oak doors that swung open immediately, as if they'd been waiting. A butler ushered her inside without ceremony, taking her soaked cloak but barely looking at her face. The entrance hall was enormous, all marble floors and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. Candles flickered in wall sconces, casting dancing shadows that made the portrait seem alive. Then she saw him. The Duke of Ashford stood at the base of a grand staircase, and Amelia's breath caught despite herself. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 31 or 32, tall and broad-shouldered in a white shirt that looked slept in. His dark hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead. But it was his face that struck her. Handsome, yes, devastatingly so, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. Dark, haunted, rimmed with exhaustion and something else. Fear, raw, desperate fear. He crossed the hall in 3 long strides. "Miss Hartley." His voice was deep, roughened by sleeplessness. "Thank God you came. I didn't know if you would. Please, you have to help her. You have to save her." Up close, she could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched. This wasn't the proud, distant Duke she'd glimpsed at the market. This was a man barely holding himself together. "Take me to her," Amelia said quietly. Relief flooded his features. He turned toward the staircase, then stopped, looking back at her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "I should warn you. She's very ill, worse than I described in the letter. I didn't want to frighten you away, but you should know. It's bad. I don't frighten easily, Your Grace. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or hope. This way. He led her up the staircase down a long corridor lined with more portraits and flickering candles. His pace was quick, almost frantic. At a set of double doors he paused, his hand on the brass handle. Whatever you need, it's yours. Herbs, equipment, anything. I'll empty the treasury if necessary. Just please, his voice cracked, please don't let her die. The vulnerability in that plea struck Amelia like a physical blow. She'd heard desperate pleas before, from parents with sick children, from husbands with dying wives. But something about this man's anguish touched a place in her chest she'd thought long protected. Let me see her first, she said gently. He opened the doors. The Dowager Duchess's chambers were vast and elegant, but Amelia's attention went immediately to the massive four-poster bed where a woman lay motionless beneath silk coverlets. Even from the doorway, Amelia could hear the labored, rattling breaths. She crossed the room quickly, setting her bag on a side table and placing her hand on the Dowager's forehead. Burning hot, dangerously so. Amelia pulled back the coverlet and began her examination, aware of the Duke hovering at her shoulder, radiating tension. The Dowager's breathing was shallow and rapid. Her lips had a bluish tinge. Her skin felt papery and dry despite the fever. When Amelia gently opened one of the woman's eyes, the pupil was dilated and sluggish. She'd seen these symptoms before, twice. Once in a miller's wife, once in a farmer's daughter. Both times she'd traced it back to the same source. "Oh, Your Grace," Amelia said, still examining the patient, "I need you to answer some questions. When did her symptoms begin?" 3 weeks ago. His voice came from directly behind her. A slight cough at first, then fever, then this. She hasn't been fully conscious in 4 days. And your water source? Has anything changed recently? New well? Different supplier? He blinked, clearly confused by the question. No, why? Amelia straightened, meeting his eyes directly. Because I believe your mother has been poisoned. The Duke staggered backward as if she'd struck him. His face went white, then flushed with anger. That's impossible. Who would? No. No, you must be mistaken. I'm not. Amelia kept her voice calm, professional. I've seen this twice before. It's a rare lung inflammation caused by consuming water contaminated with specific toxic herbs. Usually accidental, sometimes not. The symptoms match perfectly. But that would mean he couldn't finish the sentence, horror dawning across his features. It means someone had access to your water supply and knowledge of poisonous plants. Amelia turned back to the Dowager, already pulling bottles from her bag. The good news is I can treat it. I'll need specific herbs from your gardens at first light. If I start treatment now, she has a strong chance of recovery. Truly? The hope in his voice was almost painful to hear. Truly. But Your Grace, if someone did this deliberately, they may try again. We'll need to investigate quietly while I treat her. He nodded slowly, processing. Then his hand suddenly grasped hers, warm and strong and desperate. Thank you. Thank you for coming, for believing me when I had nowhere else to turn. The touch sent electricity up Amelia's arm. She looked down at their joined hands, then up into his face and saw something there that had nothing to do with gratitude for a dying mother. Something that made her pulse race, and her instincts scream danger of an entirely different kind. I'll do everything I can, she managed. I know you will. He didn't release her hand. Promise me something. What? His dark eyes held hers with burning intensity. Promise you'll stay. Not just tonight. Not just until she recovers. Stay here, at Ashford Manor. I'll give you anything you need. Build you a laboratory. Pay you whatever you ask. Just promise you won't leave. Your Grace, Sebastian, he interrupted. Please call me Sebastian. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was madness. They'd just met. She should refuse. Maintain professional distance, treat his mother and return to her cottage and her safe, solitary life. But looking into his haunted, desperate eyes, she found herself unable to form the word no. Let me save your mother first, she said quietly. Then we'll talk about the rest. Amelia worked through the night with steady, practiced hands. She crushed dried herbs in the Dowager's porcelain mortar, mixed tinctures in crystal vials, and prepared poultices that filled the chamber with the sharp scent of medicinal plants. The Duke, Sebastian, refused to leave his mother's side. He sat in a chair pulled close to the bed. watching Amelia's every movement with an intensity that made her acutely aware of his presence. "What is that?" he asked as she ground a particular root into powder. "Elecampane. It opens the lungs, helps clear the inflammation." Amelia kept her voice low and calm. She'd learned years ago that explaining her work helped anxious family members feel less helpless. Combined with mullein and a touch of lobelia, it should ease her breathing within hours. Sebastian leaned forward, studying the herbs. "I've never heard of half these plants. Most physicians haven't. They rely on what they learned in medical schools. My father taught me the old knowledge, passed down through generations of healers." She mixed the powder with warm water and honey, creating a thick syrup. "The ancient ways are often the most effective." "Your father was an apothecary?" "A herbalist. The best in 3 counties. Amelia's throat tightened as it always did when speaking of him. "He died 3 years ago, consumption. Ironic, really. He could cure almost anything, but not the illness that took him in the end." Sebastian's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry. Losing a parent is—" He trailed off, looking at his mother's pale face. "I can't imagine surviving it." "You don't survive it," Amelia said quietly, carefully lifting the dowager's head to administer a spoonful of medicine. "Shall I just learn to carry the loss with you?" Silence fell between them, broken only by the dowager's labored breathing and the storm still raging outside. Amelia adjusted pillows, checked pulses, placed cool cloths on the burning forehead. Sebastian watched it all and slowly, hesitantly began to talk. "She raised me alone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My father died when I was 12. Riding accident. Everyone expected her to remarry, to find someone to help manage the estate and guide me. But she refused every offer. She said she'd made a promise to my father that she'd raise me herself, and she kept that promise." Amelia glanced at him. In the candlelight, exhaustion carved deep shadows under his eyes. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She is. Is." He rubbed his face with both hands. "God, I don't even know what tense to use anymore. She's been slipping away for weeks and I've been helpless, watching her fade. The physicians came with their leeches and their bleeding and their useless powders. They took my money and offered empty reassurances, and all the while she got worse." "That must have been terrifying." "Terrifying doesn't begin to cover it." Sebastian stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain lashed against the glass. "If she dies, I'll be completely alone. No siblings, no wife, no children. Just me and this enormous estate and a title that feels like a prison." The rawness of his confession surprised Amelia. Dukes didn't usually bare their souls to commoners they'd just met. But perhaps that was precisely why he felt safe speaking. She was a stranger, a healer summoned in crisis, someone outside his world who would disappear once her work was done. Except his earlier plea echoed in her mind. "Promise you'll stay." "You must have friends," Amelia said carefully, preparing another poultice. "Other members of society." Sebastian laughed, a bitter sound. "I have acquaintances, people who want favors or connections or invitations to balls. I stopped attending society functions 2 years ago. The constant performance exhausted me. Everyone wanting something, no one seeing past the title to the person underneath." Amelia understood that loneliness more than he knew. "People fear what I do," she said, spreading the warm poultice across the dowager's chest. "They come to me when they're desperate, when their children are dying or their wives are in agony. They're grateful when I heal them. But afterward, they cross the street to avoid me. They whisper that I'm unnatural, that no woman should possess such knowledge. I've had marriage proposals from men who wanted to control my gift, to decide who I could treat and who I couldn't. I refused them all." Sebastian turned from the window, his dark eyes finding hers across the room. "So you chose to be alone rather than surrender who you are?" "Yes, that takes courage. Or stubbornness." Amelia managed a small smile. "My father used to say I had more spine than sense." "I think your father would be proud of you." Sebastian moved closer, watching as she checked his mother's pulse. "You've built a life on your own terms. That's rarer than you might think, especially for a woman." Their eyes met, and Amelia felt that electric awareness again, that sense of standing on the edge of something dangerous and thrilling. She forced herself to look away, to focus on her patient. "Your mother is responding to the treatment," she said, keeping her voice professional. "Her pulse is stronger than when I arrived. The fever hasn't broken yet, but her breathing is slightly easier. Because of you." Sebastian's voice was warm with gratitude and something else. Something that made Amelia's skin prickle with awareness. Because of the herbs and proper diagnosis. "Don't diminish what you've done." He reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on his mother's wrist. "You gave me hope when I had none left." The touch sent heat racing up Amelia's arm. She should pull away, should maintain appropriate distance, but his hand was warm and strong and steady, and she found herself frozen, caught in his gaze. "Sebastian," she began, then stopped, unsure what she meant to say. "I remember you," he said suddenly. "From the village market 5 years ago. You were wearing a blue dress with a ribbon in your hair. A child had fallen, scraped his knees badly. You knelt in the dirt without hesitation, cleaning his wounds, speaking to him so gently that he stopped crying. I watched you for several minutes." Amelia's breath caught. "You remember that? I wanted to speak to you, to thank you for your kindness. But I lost my nerve." A rueful smile touched his lips. "The great Duke of Ashford, too intimidated to approach a woman kneeling in the village square." "Why were you intimidated?" "Because you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and because there was something about the way you helped that child, such compassion and skill and complete lack of self-consciousness. You weren't performing kindness. You were simply being kind. I'd never seen anything like it in my world of calculated gestures and social maneuvering." Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Sebastian, The Dowager stirred suddenly, making a small sound. Both of them jumped back, the intimate moment shattered. Amelia leaned over her patient, checking vitals with practiced efficiency. "Her fever is starting to break," she said, relief flooding through her. "This is good." "Very good." Sebastian moved to his mother's other side, taking her hand. "Mother, can you hear me?" The Dowager's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Her breathing, though still labored, had definitely eased. The bluish tinge was fading from her lips. "She's not out of danger yet," Amelia cautioned. "But she's fighting. Her body is responding to the treatment. I'll need to gather fresh herbs from your gardens at dawn. Prepare stronger medicines. For now we wait. Then I'll wait with you." Sebastian settled back into his chair, still holding his mother's hand. "You should rest. You look exhausted." "I can't. Not until I know she's truly going to survive." Amelia nodded, understanding. She pulled another chair close to the bed and sat, prepared for a long vigil. The candles burned lower. The storm outside began to ease. And in the quiet hours before dawn, they talked. Sebastian told her about his childhood, about learning to manage the estate, about the crushing weight of responsibility that came with his title. Amelia shared stories of her apprenticeship with her father, of herbs gathered by moonlight, of patients saved and lost. They discovered a shared love of books, a similar dry sense of humor, parallel experiences of isolation despite their vastly different circumstances. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, as Amelia was adjusting the Dowager's blankets, her hand brushed Sebastian's accidentally. They both froze. He turned his hand palm up, and after a heartbeat of hesitation, Amelia placed hers in it. Their fingers intertwined. Neither of them spoke. They simply sat there in the candlelight, holding hands across a dying woman's bed, and Amelia felt something shift deep in her chest. Something terrifying and wonderful and completely inappropriate, given that they'd known each other less than 6 hours. When the first grey light of dawn crept through the windows, Amelia reluctantly pulled her hand free. "I need to gather those herbs now." Sebastian nodded, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When you return, we need to discuss what you said earlier, about the poisoning. If someone deliberately harmed my mother, I need to know who and why. I'll investigate quietly while I treat her. Whoever did this may not realize she's recovering. That gives us an advantage. Us." Sebastian smiled slightly. "I like that word." So did Amelia, though she knew she shouldn't. She gathered her cloak and headed for the door, but his voice stopped her. "Amelia," she turned back. "Thank you for everything. For coming. For giving me hope, for—" He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. "For making me feel less alone. You're welcome," she said softly. "Now get some rest. I'll be back within the hour." But as she made her way through the silent manor toward the gardens, Amelia knew rest would be impossible. Her mind raced with 2 parallel concerns: the mystery of who had poisoned the Dowager Duchess, and the far more dangerous mystery of why her heart was racing every time Sebastian looked at her. She'd come to Ashford Manor to heal a dying woman. She hadn't expected to find a connection that threatened to heal the loneliness she'd carried for years. And as the sun rose over the estate gardens, painting everything in shades of gold, Amelia wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake in coming here. Or perhaps, whispered a traitorous voice in her heart, it was the best decision she'd ever made. The estate gardens were still draped in morning mist when Amelia found what she was looking for. Not just the healing herbs she needed, but evidence of something far more sinister. Near the old stone well that supplied water to the manor's east wing, where the Dowager's chambers were located, she discovered traces of monkshood growing in a deliberate pattern. Someone had planted it there recently. The earth was still loose around the roots. Amelia's blood ran cold. Monkshood was deadly. Even small amounts in drinking water could cause the exact symptoms the Dowager displayed. This wasn't accidental contamination. Someone had poisoned the Duchess intentionally. She knelt beside the well, examining the area carefully. The head gardener, an elderly man named Thomas, approached with his morning tools. "Miss Hartley? His Grace said you'd be gathering herbs. Thomas, how long have these monkshood plants been here?" Amelia kept her voice casual. The old man frowned, leaning closer. "Those weren't there last week, miss. I tend this garden myself. Someone's planted them fresh. Who has access to the gardens at night?" Thomas scratched his weathered chin. "Well, anyone from the household, I suppose. Though I have noticed Mr. Richard coming through here at odd hours lately." The Duke's cousin. "Lives in the West Wing." Amelia's mind raced. A cousin who stood to inherit if Sebastian's line died out. A cousin with opportunity and motive. Does Mr. Richard have knowledge of plants? His mother was an herbalist, God rest her soul. Died when he was young, but she taught him plenty before she passed. Thomas's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Miss, you don't think—" "I don't think anything yet," Amelia said firmly, though her heart pounded. "Please don't mention this conversation to anyone. Can you remove these plants carefully and bring them to my workroom? I'll need them as evidence." After Thomas hurried off, Amelia gathered the legitimate healing herbs she needed, her mind churning with this new information. She had to tell Sebastian, but carefully. Accusing a family member of attempted murder required absolute proof. When she returned to the Dowager's chambers, she found Sebastian asleep in his chair, his head tilted back against the cushion, his face finally peaceful in rest. Amelia's heart softened at the sight. He looked younger when he slept, less burdened by responsibility and grief. She set down her basket quietly and checked on her patient. The Dowager's fever had dropped significantly. Her breathing was steadier, deeper. Her color had improved from the frightening pallor of the night before. Relief washed through Amelia. The woman would survive. Is she better? Amelia turned to find Sebastian awake, watching her with those dark, intense eyes. Much better. The crisis has passed. She'll need continued treatment, but she's going to recover fully. Sebastian stood, crossing to the bed in 2 quick strides. He took his mother's hand, his shoulders sagging with relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Thank God. Thank you. Amelia, His voice broke. Without thinking, Amelia moved to his side, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "She's strong." She fought hard. Sebastian turned to her, and suddenly his arms were around her, pulling her into an embrace. Amelia stiffened in surprise, then slowly relaxed against him. He was warm and solid, and she could feel his heart racing against her cheek. They stood that way for a long moment, 2 lonely people finding unexpected comfort in each other. When he finally pulled back, his hands remained on her shoulders. "Stay," he said urgently, "and please. I know I asked last night, but I'm asking again. Stay here at Ashford Manor, not just for my mother's recovery. Stay for me. Sebastian, we barely know each other. I know enough." His hands tightened slightly. "I know you're brilliant and compassionate. I know you see me as a person, not a title. I know that in one night, I've felt more connection with you than I've felt with anyone in years. Tell me you don't feel it too." Amelia wanted to deny it, but she couldn't lie. "I feel it. But that doesn't mean acting on it is wise. I'm a commoner. You're a duke. Society would never accept. I don't care about society. You should. Your reputation, your position, mean nothing if I'm alone." Sebastian's voice was fierce. "Amelia, I've spent years in isolation. convincing myself it was better than the alternative. That being alone was safer than risking connection with people who only wanted to use me. But you're different. You don't know that. We met hours ago during a crisis. You might be confusing gratitude with... Don't. He cupped her face with both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Don't diminish this. I remember you from 5 years ago. I've thought about you more times than I can count. The kind woman in the village square who cared more about a child's scraped knees than impressing the Duke watching from his carriage. When my mother's illness reached its worst, and I was desperate enough to seek help outside traditional medicine, your name was the first one I thought of. This isn't gratitude, Amelia. This is something much more dangerous. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should step back, should maintain professional distance, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. But his hands were warm on her face, and his eyes held such raw honesty that her defenses crumbled. There's something I need to tell you, she said quietly. About your mother's illness. Sebastian's expression shifted to concern. What is it? Not here, Amelia glanced at the door. We need privacy, and I need to show you something. They moved to a small sitting room adjoining the bedchamber, closing the door behind them. Amelia explained what she'd found in the garden, watching Sebastian's face darken with each word. Monkshood, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Someone planted monkshood near my mother's water supply. Yes, and Thomas mentioned your cousin Richard has been seen near the gardens at odd hours. Sebastian's jaw clenched. Richard? My God, he's third in line for the title. If my mother died and I remained unmarried without heirs... He stopped, the full implication hitting him. He was trying to murder her. We need proof before we accuse him. But Sebastian, if I'm right, your mother wasn't just ill. Someone in your household tried to kill her. And they might try again when they realize she's recovering. Sebastian turned to the window, his hands clenched into fists. Amelia could see him struggling to process this betrayal. Family, someone he'd trusted. What do we do? He asked finally. I'll continue treating your mother openly, while investigating quietly. If Richard believes his plan is working, he'll grow careless. We'll catch him. Amelia moved to stand beside him. But it means I need to stay here at least for a while, to protect her and gather evidence. Sebastian looked at her, something shifting in his expression. So you'll stay? For your mother's safety, yes. Only for that? Amelia met his gaze steadily. You know it's not only for that. The admission hung between them, charged with possibility and danger. Sebastian reached for her hand, and this time Amelia didn't pull away. Then stay, he said softly. Help me catch whoever did this. Protect my mother, and let me prove to you that what I feel isn't gratitude or confusion or anything temporary. And if you're wrong, if this connection is just the intensity of crisis, then I'll be wrong. But I don't think I am. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Do you? Amelia looked into his eyes and knew with terrifying certainty that she was falling for this man. It was too fast, too intense, too impossible. But it was real. No, she whispered, I don't think you're wrong. 3 days passed in a careful dance of deception and discovery. Amelia maintained her vigil over the Dowager Duchess, administering treatments every few hours, while the household watched the patient's remarkable recovery with amazement. Servants whispered about the miracle healer summoned from the village. The Dowager herself, now conscious for hours at a time, squeezed Amelia's hand and called her an angel sent from heaven. But beneath the surface of this medical success, Amelia was hunting a would-be murderer. She established a comfortable routine that gave her access to the entire manor. Morning treatments in the Dowager's chambers. Afternoon walks through the gardens with Sebastian, ostensibly to gather fresh herbs, but actually to observe who came and went from the contaminated well. Evening teas with the recovering Dowager, who had begun sitting up in bed and asking pointed questions about Amelia's growing attachment to her son. He watches you constantly, the Dowager said one evening, her voice still weak but her eyes sharp with intelligence. I haven't seen Sebastian look at anyone that way since he was a boy with his first infatuation. Amelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Your Grace, I'm simply here to ensure your recovery. My dear, I may have been ill, but I'm not blind. The Dowager smiled gently. And please call me Catherine. Any woman who saves my life and captures my son's heart deserves to use my given name. Before Amelia could respond, a knock interrupted them. Sebastian entered with another man at his side. Amelia recognized him immediately from the servants' descriptions. Richard Ashford, the Duke's cousin. He was perhaps 38, handsome in a polished way, with fair hair and an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Those eyes, pale blue and calculating, swept over Amelia with barely concealed curiosity. "Aunt Catherine, thank God you're improving," Richard said, moving to the bedside with practiced concern. "We've all been so worried. And you must be the famous Miss Hartley. My cousin speaks of nothing but your miraculous treatments. Mr. Ashford." Amelia kept her voice neutral, watching him carefully. "I confess I'm fascinated by herbal medicine," Richard continued smoothly. "My late mother practiced it before she died. Perhaps we could discuss your methods sometime." "Perhaps." Amelia noticed how his gaze flickered to the Dowager, assessing her recovery with something that looked disturbingly like disappointment. The visit was brief. Richard made appropriate comments about his aunt's health, promised to visit again soon, and departed with Sebastian. The moment the door closed, Catherine spoke. "That boy has always made my skin crawl." Amelia turned sharply. "You don't trust him?" "I stopped trusting Richard years ago. He's always hovering, always asking questions about the estate, about inheritance laws, about Sebastian's marriage prospects." Catherine's expression hardened. "A month before I fell ill, I caught him in the library reading my late husband's will. He claimed he was simply curious about family history, but I knew better. I wrote a letter to my solicitor about it. This was the breakthrough Amelia needed." "Where is that letter?" "In my writing desk, hidden compartment on the left side." Press the carved rose. Amelia found the compartment and the letter within. Catherine's handwriting detailed her suspicions about Richard's unusual interest in inheritance matters, his questions about what would happen if Sebastian died without heirs, his increasingly frequent visits to Ashford Manor over the past year. "May I show this to Sebastian?" "Show him everything. That boy needs to know what kind of viper he's been sheltering." That evening, Amelia shared the letter with Sebastian in the library. She watched his face darken as he read his mother's words. "I should have seen it," he said quietly, setting down the letter. "The way he always asked about my marriage plans. His suggestions that I should marry quickly to secure the succession. I thought he was being helpful. He was being calculating. If your mother died and you remained unmarried, he'd be that much closer to the title." Amelia moved to stand beside him. "Sebastian, I think it's time to set a trap." His eyes met hers. "What did you have in mind?" The next morning, Amelia made sure to encounter Richard in the gardens. She mentioned casually that she'd discovered unusual contamination in the water supply near the east wing. "Nothing dangerous now," she assured him, "just some curious mineral deposits she was analyzing in her temporary workroom." Richard's reaction was subtle but telling. A flicker of alarm in his eyes, a tightening around his mouth. His questions were too specific, too urgent. Where exactly had she found the contamination? What kind of minerals? Had she mentioned it to anyone else? That night, Amelia waited in her workroom with the door slightly ajar. Sebastian hid in the adjacent dressing room, positioned where he could see and hear everything. They'd set out Thomas's carefully preserved monk's hood samples on the work table, along with Amelia's analysis notes. Just after midnight, the door creaked open. Richard slipped inside, carrying a small lamp. Amelia watched through the crack as he moved directly to her work table, examining the monk's hood samples with shaking hands. He gathered them quickly, stuffing them into a leather satchel. "Looking for something, Richard?" Sebastian stepped from his hiding place, his voice cold with rage. Richard spun around, going pale. "Sebastian, I was just—" "Miss Hartley mentioned contamination, and I was concerned." "Stop lying." Sebastian advanced on him. "We know what you did. You poisoned my mother with monk's hood from these very plants. Thomas saw you in the gardens. Mother suspected you were after the inheritance, and now we've caught you trying to destroy the evidence." Richard's composure cracked. "You can't prove anything." "A few plants, an old woman's paranoid suspicions. I can prove it." Amelia stepped forward, holding up a sealed vial. "This contains water from the contaminated well, preserved before you could remove the plants. It has measurable traces of aconitine, the poison from monkshood. Combined with witness testimony and your attempt to destroy evidence tonight, it's more than enough for the magistrate." Richard's face twisted with desperation and rage. She was just one old woman standing between me and what should have been mine. My father was the elder brother. I should have inherited, not Sebastian. But no, the title went to the younger son and I got nothing. Nothing but a crumbling estate in Cornwall and debts I can't pay. So you tried to murder her? Sebastian's voice shook with fury. Your own aunt? The woman who welcomed you into this house, who treated you like family. Family. Richard spat the word. What good is family without fortune? I waited years for you to marry some suitable girl and die in a convenient hunting accident. But you remained stubbornly single, and she remained stubbornly healthy. I had to take matters into my own hands. The confession hung in the air, ugly and damning. Sebastian called for his steward, who'd been waiting nearby with 2 footmen. Richard was restrained despite his struggles and protests. The magistrate will hear about this at first light, Sebastian said coldly. You'll be charged with attempted murder. If there's any justice, you'll hang. As Richard was dragged away, still shouting about unfair inheritance and his rightful due, Sebastian stood frozen in the center of the workroom. Amelia approached carefully. Sebastian! He turned to her, and she saw the devastation in his eyes. My own cousin. My own blood. He tried to kill my mother for money. I'm so sorry. You saved her. If you hadn't come, if you hadn't recognized the poisoning, if you hadn't investigated... His voice broke. She would have died and I never would have known it was murder. Amelia took his hands, but she didn't die. She's going to fully recover, and Richard will face justice. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Stay, he whispered into her hair. Please, Amelia. I need you, not just for this crisis, but always. The arrest of Richard Ashford sent shockwaves through the household. Servants whispered in corners. The magistrate arrived at dawn, grim-faced and efficient, taking statements from Sebastian, Amelia, Thomas the gardener, and finally the Dowager Duchess herself, who sat propped against pillows and delivered her testimony with icy precision. By midday, Richard was gone, transported to the county jail to await trial. The evidence was overwhelming. His confession, witnessed by multiple people, the poisoned plants, the contaminated water samples, his own aunt's written suspicions. The magistrate assured Sebastian that Richard would face the full consequences of attempted murder. But Sebastian felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache where trust had been. He retreated to the library after the magistrate departed, pouring himself a brandy he didn't really want. The afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, illuminating shelves of books he couldn't focus on. His hand shook slightly as he raised the glass. The door opened quietly. Amelia entered, closing it behind her. You shouldn't be alone right now, she said gently. I'm fine. But his voice betrayed him, rough with suppressed emotion. Amelia crossed the room and took the brandy glass from his hand, setting it aside. No, you're not. And that's understandable. You were just betrayed by family. Something in her calm compassion broke through Sebastian's defenses. He sank into a leather chair, covering his face with both hands. I trusted him. For years I welcomed him into my home, shared meals with him, confided in him about estate matters, and all the while he was plotting to murder my mother. Amelia knelt beside his chair, her hand gentle on his arm. This isn't your fault, isn't it? I should have seen the signs, should have protected her better. Sebastian, look at me. She waited until he lowered his hands. Richard fooled everyone. Your mother, the servants, me, when I first met him. He was skilled at deception. That's what makes betrayal so devastating. It's not a failure on your part. It's a choice he made. Sebastian stared at her. This woman who'd entered his life less than a week ago and somehow become essential. How are you so calm about all this? I'm not calm. I'm furious. Her eyes flashed. He tried to murder a good woman for money. He poisoned her slowly, let her suffer for weeks. If I'd arrived even a day later, she stopped, swallowing hard. But I'm not letting that anger consume me. And neither should you. What should I do with it then? Feel it, process it, and then let it go. Amelia's voice softened. You have your mother back, healthy and whole. That's what matters now. Sebastian reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, tender. I have more than that. I have you. Amelia's breath caught. Sebastian, I know what you're going to say. That this is too fast, too intense. That I'm confusing gratitude with something else. But Amelia, I've been alone for so long, surrounded by people but utterly isolated. I stopped believing genuine connection was possible. He cupped her face gently. Then you walked into my mother's chambers with your medicine bag and your confidence, and everything changed. We barely know each other. I know you're brave and brilliant. I know you see past titles and wealth to the person underneath. I know that when you touch me, even accidentally, I feel more alive than I have in years. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Tell me you don't feel it too. Amelia closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they shimmered with unshed tears. I feel it. God help me, I feel it so strongly it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because I've built my entire life around independence. I chose solitude over marriage to men who wanted to control my gift, who saw my healing as something to manage or suppress. I swore I'd never surrender who I am for anyone. She placed her hand over his where it rested on her cheek. But with you, I want to surrender. I want to stay in this house in your life, and that wanting scares me more than anything. Sebastian's heart raced. What if you didn't have to surrender? What if I'm not asking you to give up anything? Sebastian, if I stayed as anything more than your mother's healer, society would destroy us both. You're a duke. I'm a commoner with a scandalous profession. The expectations, the judgment. I don't care about society's expectations. His voice was fierce. I've spent my entire life meeting others' expectations, and it's left me miserable and alone. For once, I want to choose something for myself. Someone for myself. But your reputation, your position, mean nothing without someone to share them with. He shifted, sliding from his chair to kneel before her so they were eye to level. Amelia, I'm not asking you to stop being a healer. I'm not asking you to become some conventional duchess who hosts tea parties and embroiders pillows. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, but be it here with me. Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks. You don't know what you're asking. The scandal, the gossip, will fade. But this, what we have, this is real. This matters. Sebastian took both her hands. I remember watching you 5 years ago, thinking I'd never have the courage to speak to someone so genuine, so fully herself. Now you're here, and I'm not letting fear or propriety or society's narrow minds steal this chance. Sebastian, I can't promise to be what a duchess should be. Good, because I don't want what a duchess should be. I want you. Amelia Hartley, healer, herbalist, the woman who saved my mother and made me believe in connection again. His voice dropped to a whisper. Please, stay with me. Not just until Mother recovers. Stay as my partner, my companion, my... He couldn't finish the sentence because Amelia kissed him. It was sudden, impulsive, nothing like the proper, careful person she usually was. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, and Sebastian froze for one shocked heartbeat before responding. His arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, became desperate, full of all the longing and fear and hope they'd both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amelia's eyes were wide with shock at her own boldness. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have... Don't you dare apologize, Sebastian's voice was rough. That was the best thing that's happened to me in years. This is madness. Then let's be mad together. He kissed her again, softer this time, tender. Stay, Amelia. Give us a chance. She pulled back, studying his face. If I stay, there have to be conditions. Name them. I continue my healing work. I don't give it up, not even partially. Agreed. I need proper workspace here. A real laboratory where I can prepare medicines and train apprentices. I'll convert the entire East Wing if necessary, and I treat anyone who needs help, regardless of whether they can pay or what society thinks. I wouldn't want it any other way. Sebastian smiled. Any other demands? Just one. Amelia's expression turned serious. Complete honesty between us always. No secrets, no protecting me by keeping me in the dark. We face things together or not at all. Sebastian nodded solemnly. I promise. No more secrets. He stood, helping her to her feet. Now I have a condition of my own. What's that? Kiss me again. Amelia laughed, the sound bright with joy and relief. She rose on her toes and kissed him. And this time there was no desperation, only the sweet certainty of a decision made, a path chosen despite all logic. When they finally left the library, hands intertwined, the Dowager Duchess was waiting in the hallway. She took one look at their linked hands and their flushed faces and smiled. About time, she said simply, and walked away humming. The Dowager Duchess insisted on taking tea in the conservatory the following afternoon, her first venture outside her bedchamber since falling ill. She looked remarkably improved. Colour returned to her cheeks, her posture straight despite weeks of bedridden weakness. Amelia had protested the exertion, but Catherine waved away her concerns with aristocratic authority. "I've been staring at those same four walls for a month. I need sunlight and flowers, and I need to speak with you privately." Now they sat among potted roses and trailing jasmine, afternoon light filtering through glass panels overhead. Catherine poured tea with steady hands and studied Amelia with unsettling directness. "My son is in love with you." Amelia nearly choked on her tea. "Your Grace—" "Catherine, please. And don't bother denying it. I saw how you looked at each other yesterday. The way he held your hand. The way you kissed him in the library." "You saw that?" Amelia's face flamed. "The door wasn't entirely closed, and I may be recovering from poisoning, but my eyesight remains excellent." Catherine's expression softened. "I'm not scandalized, my dear. I'm relieved. Sebastian has been alone too long, hiding from society, convinced that genuine connection was impossible. Then you arrived and changed everything." "It's complicated," Amelia said quietly. "All worthwhile things are." Catherine set down her teacup. "I need to tell you something about my own past. Something that might help you understand what lies ahead, if you choose to stay with my son." Amelia leaned forward, listening intently. "I was not born to nobility," Catherine began. "My father was a successful merchant in London, comfortable, respectable, but decidedly common by aristocratic standards. I met Sebastian's father at a charity event when I was 22. He was a duke, handsome and kind, and completely inappropriate for me by society's measure. What happened? He courted me anyway, despite his family's horror. They threatened to disown him. His mother called me a fortune-hunting merchant's daughter. Society matrons refused to receive me. The gossip was vicious and relentless. I endured things you cannot imagine. Ladies who cut me in the street. Whispered insults loud enough for me to hear. Deliberate exclusion from every important social event." Catherine's voice remained steady, but pain flickered in her eyes. "It nearly destroyed our relationship 3 separate times. I told him I couldn't bear to ruin his life, that he should marry someone suitable. But he didn't. No, he stood before his entire family and said that if they couldn't accept me, they would lose him entirely. He meant it. His mother relented eventually, though she never truly warmed to me. But he never wavered, never made me feel that I was less than I should be." Catherine reached across the table, taking Amelia's hand. "That's how I know my son's love for you is real. He has his father's heart. When Sebastian commits, he commits absolutely." Amelia's throat tightened. "I'm terrified of losing myself. Every man who ever showed interest wanted to control my healing, to decide who I could treat, to make me into someone more conventional. Then those men were fools who didn't deserve you." Catherine squeezed her hand. "But Amelia, you must understand something crucial. If you stay with Sebastian, if you become his duchess, society will judge you harshly. They'll call you unsuitable. They'll question your motives. They'll make your life difficult in countless small, cruel ways. I know. That's why I'm not certain I can—" "Let me finish." Catherine's voice was firm. "They will judge you, but only if you give them power over you. The mistake I made was caring too much about their approval, letting their opinions wound me. I wasted years trying to prove I was worthy of my position. What I should have done was exactly what I pleased and let them adjust." Amelia blinked in surprise at this unexpected advice. "You have a gift, a calling," Catherine continued. "Don't you dare abandon it to become some vapid society duchess. Sebastian doesn't want that, and I won't allow it. If you stay as yourself. You practice your healing. You train apprentices. You scandalize proper ladies by treating their servants with the same care as their children. And you hold your head high while doing it. But the scandal will be temporary. People adapt, especially when they need something. Within a year, those same ladies who snubbed you will be quietly sending their sick relatives to your door." Catherine smiled shrewdly. "Trust me on this. What if Sebastian changes his mind? What if he decides he needs a more conventional wife after all? He won't. But if you have doubts, test him." Catherine released Amelia's hand and sat back. "Before you agree to anything permanent, tell him exactly what you need, not what you think he wants to hear. but what you truly require to be happy. If he balks, if he tries to negotiate away your calling or your independence, then you walk away with no regrets. Amelia absorbed this wisdom, feeling something shift inside her chest. You really think he'll accept my conditions? I think my son would build you a hospital with his bare hands if that's what you needed. Catherine's expression turned tender. He's been waiting his entire life for someone who sees him, truly sees him. You're that person, Amelia. Don't let fear steal that from either of you. They talked for another hour, Catherine sharing stories of her early marriage, the battles she'd fought and won, the compromises that mattered and those that didn't. By the time Amelia left the conservatory, her mind was clear. She knew what she needed to do. That evening, she requested a private meeting with Sebastian in his study. He looked up from estate ledgers as she entered, and the joy that lit his face at seeing her made her heart skip. Amelia, I was just thinking about you. We need to talk. She closed the door behind her. About what happens next. Sebastian set aside his work immediately, giving her his full attention. I'm listening. Amelia took a deep breath. I've been thinking about your proposal to stay here, to build a life together, and I've realized that before I can answer, I need you to understand exactly what that would mean. Go on. I'm a healer, Sebastian. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. I cannot and will not stop practicing medicine, no matter what society expects of a duchess. Her voice was firm. If I stay, I need a proper laboratory, a real workspace where I can prepare remedies and conduct research. I need freedom to treat anyone who comes to me, regardless of their ability to pay or their social standing. I need to train apprentices, to pass on my father's knowledge to the next generation. Sebastian nodded, his expression serious. Continue. I won't host elaborate balls or spend my days making social calls or worry about what the right people think of me. I'll be a terrible duchess by conventional standards. I'll probably embarrass you regularly. Amelia's hands clenched at her sides. And I need you to promise that you'll never ask me to change that. Never suggest that I'm being too unconventional or that I should consider society's opinions more carefully. Because if you do, this won't work. The room fell silent. Sebastian stood slowly, moving around his desk to stand before her. Amelia held her breath, terrified he would argue, would try to find some middle ground that would ultimately require her to compromise herself. Instead, he smiled. Broad and genuine and full of something that looked like pride. Is that all? He asked. Amelia blinked. What? Are those all your conditions? Because frankly, I was expecting more. Sebastian, I'm serious. So am I. He took her hands gently. Amelia, did you think any of that would be a problem for me? She stared at him, confused by his reaction. Most men would find it completely unacceptable. Then most men are idiots. Sebastian's thumbs traced circles on her palms. I have a proposal of my own. Would you like to hear it? Sebastian led Amelia to the large window overlooking the east wing of the manor. The afternoon sun painted the old stone walls in shades of gold and amber. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and pointed toward the wing. Do you see that entire section? 20 rooms, most of them unused for decades, storage for furniture nobody wants, and portraits of ancestors nobody remembers. He turned her gently to face him. What if we converted all of it into a medical facility? A proper one, with treatment rooms, a laboratory, space for apprentices to live and study, even a small ward for patients who need extended care. Amelia's eyes widened. Sebastian, that would cost a fortune. I have a fortune. Several, actually, and no idea what to do with most of them. His expression was earnest. Why not use that wealth for something meaningful? We could make Ashford Manor a centre for healing innovation. People could come from all over England to learn from you, to receive treatment they can't get anywhere else. You've actually thought about this. I've thought about little else since you arrived. Sebastian took both her hands. Amelia, I don't want you to stop being who you are. I want you to become more of who you are. I want to give you resources and space and freedom to expand your work beyond anything you've imagined. Tears pricked Amelia's eyes. Why would you do this? Because I love you. The words were simple, direct, utterly sincere. Because watching you work, seeing your passion and dedication, made me realize what I've been missing. Purpose. Real purpose. Not just managing estates and attending to duties. If I can help you heal people, train the next generation of healers, change how medicine is practiced in this country, then my life means something beyond my title. Sebastian. Amelia's voice broke. I don't want a conventional duchess who fits into society's narrow mold. He cupped her face with infinite tenderness. I want you, exactly as you are. The woman who kneels in the dirt to help injured children. Who stayed up all night to save my mother. Who investigated a poisoning while everyone else accepted the official story. That's who I want beside me for the rest of my life. Society will crucify us. Let them try. Sebastian's voice held steel beneath the gentleness. I've wasted too many years caring what people think. I'm done with that. If they can't accept you, they're not welcome in my house or my life. Amelia stared at him. This man who somehow saw past every defense she'd ever built and loved her not despite who she was. But because of it, you really mean all this? Every word. Sebastian stepped back slightly, and to Amelia's shock he lowered himself to one knee. What are you doing? What I should have done days ago. From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a ring of breathtaking beauty. A sapphire the color of midnight, surrounded by diamonds that caught the afternoon light. This was my grandmother's ring. My grandfather gave it to her when he proposed, and she wore it for 53 years of marriage. She told me once to save it for a woman who would turn my world upside down in the best possible way. Amelia's hand covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Amelia Hartley, I'm not proposing that you become a duchess. I'm asking if you'll be my partner, my companion, my love, and continue being the extraordinary healer you've always been. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life supporting your work and standing beside you against whatever challenges come? For a long moment, Amelia couldn't speak. Then she dropped to her knees before him, taking his face in her hands. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Sebastian's joy was incandescent. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed there on the study floor, two people who'd found each other against all odds and logic. 2 weeks later, the reality of their decision became painfully clear. News of their engagement had spread through society like wildfire, and the scandal was every bit as vicious as Catherine had warned. Amelia received her first test at a dinner party hosted by Lord and Lady Pemberton at a neighbouring estate. Sebastian had been invited months earlier, and he insisted on bringing Amelia as his fiancée, making their relationship undeniably public. The moment they entered the drawing room, conversations stuttered and died. Ladies stared openly, some curious, others openly hostile. Gentlemen looked uncomfortable, unsure how to treat a common-born woman who would soon be a duchess. Lady Pemberton, a woman in her 50s with the face of someone who'd spent a lifetime judging others, approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Your Grace, how delightful! And this must be your companion. She looked Amelia up and down as if examining livestock. My fiancée, Sebastian corrected firmly. Miss Amelia Hartley, may I present Lady Pemberton? Amelia curtsied with the grace her mother had taught her years ago. Thank you for welcoming us, Lady Pemberton. How could I refuse a duke? Lady Pemberton's tone made it clear she'd have preferred to do exactly that. Tell me, Miss Hartley, where did you receive your education? I'm not familiar with your family. The question was designed to humiliate, to force Amelia to admit her common background in front of everyone. Sebastian's hand tightened on her arm, but Amelia kept her voice steady. My father was an herbalist. He educated me himself in medicine, botany, and chemistry. I've spent the past decade treating patients throughout the county. How rustic. Lady Pemberton turned to another woman nearby. Lady Worthington, didn't you mention needing someone to treat your hunting dogs? Perhaps Miss Hartley could help. The insult was clear. Several women tittered behind their fans. Amelia felt heat rise to her face, but before she could respond, Sebastian spoke. Actually, Lady Pemberton, Miss Hartley recently saved my mother's life when every physician in London had given up hope. She also uncovered and stopped an attempted murder. Her medical knowledge is quite extraordinary, though I wouldn't expect everyone to recognize expertise when they see it. The barb landed perfectly. Lady Pemberton flushed, but she wasn't finished. Throughout dinner, she made pointed comments about breeding and proper education. Other ladies joined in, discussing the importance of social connections and appropriate matches. Every word was designed to remind Amelia she didn't belong. Amelia endured it with quiet dignity, refusing to show how deeply the cuts went. But by the time dinner ended, she felt raw and exhausted. She excused herself to the ladies' withdrawing room, needing a moment alone. Lady Worthington followed her, cornering her by the mirror. You should know that Sebastian will tire of this novelty eventually. Men like him always do. He'll want a wife who knows how to navigate society, who won't embarrass him at every turn. If he wanted that, he'd have chosen someone like you, Amelia replied coolly, surprising herself with her boldness. Lady Worthington's face turned ugly. You're a jumped-up peasant playing at being a lady. Everyone sees through you. You've trapped a duke using proximity, and perhaps other methods I'm too polite to name. But you'll never be one of us. Never. The words struck deep, confirming every fear Amelia had harbored. She turned away, blinking back tears, and nearly collided with Sebastian, who stood in the doorway. His expression was thunderous. Lady Worthington, I believe you owe my fiancé an apology. The woman paled. Your Grace, I heard exactly what you were doing. Sebastian's voice could have frozen flames. You insulted the woman I love, questioned her integrity, and made baseless accusations about her character. If you were a man, I'd call you out for it. Lady Worthington fled. Sebastian turned to Amelia, his anger melting into concern. Are you all right? I want to leave. Then we leave, he offered his arm. They walked back through the drawing room together, heads high. At the door, Sebastian turned to address the assembled guests. My fiancée is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. She saved my mother when your expensive physicians failed. She has more intelligence, compassion, and genuine nobility in her smallest finger than most people in this room possess entirely. If any of you cannot see that, the failing is yours, not hers. Good evening. They left in ringing silence. In the carriage, Amelia finally let the tears fall. Sebastian pulled her close. I'm sorry. I should have known they'd be cruel. You warned me. Your mother warned me. I just didn't expect it to hurt so much. We don't have to do this. We can marry quietly, avoid society entirely. Amelia pulled back, wiping her eyes. No. If I'm going to be your wife, I won't hide. I won't give them that power. She managed a shaky smile. Your mother said society would adapt eventually. I suppose we'll test that theory. Sebastian kissed her forehead. You're braver than all of them combined. The wedding took place on a golden morning in late September at Ashford Manor's private chapel. Amelia had refused a grand London ceremony, and Sebastian had agreed immediately. This was for them, not for society's approval or entertainment. The chapel was small and ancient, built of grey stone worn smooth by centuries. Morning light streamed through stained glass windows, painting the interior in jeweled colours. White roses from the estate gardens adorned every surface, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Amelia wore a simple gown of ivory silk that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit by the manor's seamstress. Her hair was dressed with small white flowers, and she carried a bouquet of healing herbs mixed with roses. Lavender for devotion, rosemary for remembrance, chamomile for patience. Each bloom held meaning, a quiet declaration of who she was and would remain. The guests were few but meaningful. The Dowager Duchess Catherine sat in the front row, fully recovered and radiant with joy. Thomas the gardener attended, along with several servants who'd grown fond of Amelia during her weeks at the manor. A handful of villagers she'd treated over the years filled the remaining pews, their presence a testament to the lives she'd touched. Notably absent were most of society. A few of Sebastian's genuine friends had come, men who valued character over convention. But the bulk of aristocratic society had declined their invitations, scandalized by the match. Amelia felt their absence like a blessing rather than an insult. Sebastian stood at the altar in formal attire, watching Amelia walk toward him with such open love that several guests dabbed at their eyes. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You're beautiful." "So are you," she whispered back, and his smile lit the chapel brighter than any candle. The vicar began the ceremony with traditional words, but when it came time for vows, Sebastian had requested permission to add his own. He faced Amelia, holding both her hands, and spoke from his heart. "Amelia, I promise to honor your calling as sacred. I promise to stand beside you, never in front of or behind you. I promise to build you laboratories and support your work, and never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are. I promise to choose you every day, in defiance of expectations and in celebration of everything that makes you extraordinary." Tears streamed down Amelia's face. as she spoke her own vows. "Sebastian, I promise to share my life and my gifts with you. I promise to face whatever challenges come together. I promise to bring healing not just to those who seek me out, but to you every day in whatever ways you need. I promise to love you not despite your title, but despite my own fears, because you're worth the risk." When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian kissed her with such tender joy that the small congregation burst into applause. The wedding breakfast was held on the manor's south lawn under clear autumn skies. Tables groaned with food prepared by the manor's kitchen. Musicians played cheerful melodies, and in a revolutionary gesture that shocked the few aristocratic guests present, Sebastian had invited the entire village to celebrate. Farmers and merchants mingled with dukes and earls. Kitchen maids danced with stable boys. Children ran laughing through the gardens. It was chaotic and improper, and absolutely perfect. Catherine raised a toast that silenced the crowd. "I was dying not 2 months ago, resigned to leaving my son alone in this world. Then Amelia arrived and saved my life. But more than that, she saved Sebastian from the loneliness that was slowly destroying him. She reminded him what it means to live with purpose and passion." Catherine's voice wavered with emotion. "Welcome to our family, daughter. You've brought light back into this house." Amelia embraced her new mother-in-law, both women crying openly. When Sebastian joined them, wrapping his arms around both, Amelia felt something settle deep in her chest. Family. Real family, built on love rather than obligation. As evening fell and guests began departing, Sebastian and Amelia stole away to the conservatory, where Catherine had given her wisdom weeks before. They stood among the flowers, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the estate. "No regrets?" Sebastian asked softly. "Not even one." Amelia leaned into him. "For though I suspect tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, let them come. We'll face them together." 6 months later, the East Wing transformation was complete. Amelia stood in what had once been dusty storage rooms and marveled at the gleaming medical facility that now occupied the space. Treatment rooms with large windows for natural light. A fully equipped laboratory with every tool and ingredient she could want. Living quarters for 4 apprentices, carefully selected from applicants who'd flooded in once word spread that the Duchess of Ashford was training healers. Her first apprentices were an unusual group. 2 young women from merchant families, denied access to traditional medical education, 1 farmer's son with natural talent for diagnosis, and surprisingly, 1 minor nobleman's daughter who defied her family to pursue healing. Together, they were revolutionizing how medicine was practiced. On this particular morning, Amelia was treating a tenant farmer's daughter who'd developed a dangerous fever. The child lay on an examination table, her parents hovering anxiously nearby. Sebastian assisted, handing Amelia instruments and supplies with practiced ease. Over the months, he'd become genuinely skilled at helping, learning to recognize symptoms and prepare common remedies. "The fever's breaking," Amelia announced after administering her treatment. "She'll recover fully, but she needs rest and plenty of fluids. I'll send you home with medicine to continue the treatment." The parents wept with gratitude. They tried to pay, pressing coins into Amelia's hands, but she gently refused. "Save it for your family. That's payment enough." After they left, Sebastian pulled Amelia into his arms. "You're exhausted. You've seen 12 patients today already." 13, she corrected with a tired smile. "But I'm happy, truly happy." "So am I." He kissed her forehead. "Though I have news that might make you happier. Lady Pemberton sent a request this morning. Her grandson is ill and her physicians can't help him. She's asking very politely if you might see him." Amelia's eyebrows rose. "Lady Pemberton? The woman who called me a jumped-up peasant?" "The very same." Apparently desperation overcomes prejudice. Sebastian grinned. "What should I tell her?" Amelia considered, then smiled. "Tell her I'll see the child tomorrow. Every child deserves healing, regardless of their grandmother's opinions. You're a better person than I am." "No, I'm just a healer. It's what I do." That evening they sat together in the library, Sebastian reviewing estate accounts while Amelia updated her medical journals. It was comfortable, domestic, the kind of quiet partnership she'd never thought possible. "I received a letter from your mother today," Amelia said, looking up from her writing. "She wants to know if we've thought about children." Sebastian's pen paused. Have we? I think about it sometimes. A child with your eyes and my stubbornness. God help us all, Sebastian laughed. But yes, someday when you're ready. When we're ready, Amelia corrected. Partners, remember? Always. He set aside his work and moved to sit beside her. Amelia, do you remember what I said the night we met? That I needed you to stay. I remember. You were desperate and exhausted, and your mother was dying. I was also completely sincere. I knew even then that you were going to change my life. He took her hand, thumb tracing over the sapphire ring she wore. Thank you for staying. For choosing this life even when it was difficult. Amelia leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for making it possible. For building me laboratories and supporting my work and standing beside me against society's judgment. We saved each other, Sebastian said softly. Yes, Amelia agreed. We did. Outside, the sun set over Ashford Manor, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The east wing's windows glowed with light from the medical facility. In the gardens, Catherine walked with Thomas, discussing plans for an expanded herb garden. The estate hummed with purpose and life. Amelia had come to this house to heal a dying woman. She'd stayed because a lonely duke had begged her not to leave. But what she'd found was so much more than she'd ever imagined. A partnership built on mutual respect. Work that mattered, and reached further than she'd ever dreamed possible. A family that chose her not despite who she was, but because of it. She'd promised Sebastian she would never leave. It was a promise she intended to keep for the rest of her life. And as they sat together in the quiet library, hands intertwined, both lost in thoughts of the future they were building together, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Love hadn't cost her independence. It had given her wings.